This is Neil King for Random Acts of Cartooning, and this month is Inktober. So my theme for the month is going to be werewolves, and I'm going to show you one of the 31 sketches that I'm doing. But first, okay everyone, so the influence for this episode is Mike Ploog from Werewolf by Night. So this is one of the essentials for Werewolf by Night. Bunch of the first issues. I love Mike Ploog. He was there at the beginning of the run, and he really set up what it was going to look like. So for me, the big theme for this is transformation. So he really has this specific look for us, but I like the idea of the transformations. And in the sketch that I was doing for my Inktober, this is what I was based off of. I tried to really go in and do it so similarly. You can see the proportions are different because it's a vertical instead of a horizontal, like my book. But just beautiful. He's not he's not a traditional kind of comic book guy. He has a very specific thing. It's probably why I like him so much. But here's another transformation. Really nice. And how about this one? A little close-up. I think what he does really well is he spots these blacks in there, and then just has a really great sense of when to use it and when not to use it. He inks most of his own stuff, but sometimes he does have other inkers. It's all this stuff that I like. What he's not doing when he gets all those big areas in. But he has such a great feel, right? That little hatch with this larger part. He's got all the little detail. He knows when to go in and out of all that detail. And that's what makes his stuff so great. It takes a long time too, and I think he had problems with deadlines and stuff, but I love all of his stuff. These were the issues that I had when I was really young. Mike Ploog, if you can I like the essentials because you can see the black and white artwork. When they recolor them, I'm not into it. Okay, so this is my sketchbook for Inktober. So I do 31 spreads. It's a watercolor piece. So this is my interior kind of cover, Wolfman. I'm going to be working on a Wolfman graphic novel. So I thought I would use this as an opportunity to kind of get myself to look at some of the different Wolfmen that have been in films and TV and all that kind of stuff. So I set it up, and whether it's American Werewolf in London, a scene from that, like this one, or the Wolfman, the more modern one, I just want to kind of show some images of them. I'm keeping this black and white, unlike my last year's book. So you just kind of get started. Now, as always with any of these sketches, what I like to do is I get a quick sketch in there, and this is based off of the Mike Ploog Werewolf by Night that I did show in my influence for this episode. And I tried to make it work with this horizontal format, as you can see. So it's pretty loose. I didn't do a lot of detail with this, with the pencil stage. But as always, I'm going to go in there and go for my detail with the around the eyes, and usually around the fingers, the hands, and all that kind of stuff. The thing about Mike Ploog that I love is that he did have some refined lines, but it looked like he would just kind of go in there with like a brush or something to kind of just lay in all of the shadows. And he did use hatching and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of more of a traditional type of an illustrator, so he doesn't have that slick look. So to me, again, it does show me where my style has evolved from, is that he's interested in just kind of that feel that you can get, and he loves to do he's really well known for his work on, Ghost Rider and Werewolf by Night and Frankenstein. He did Swamp Thing also, but that was after, this further on in his career. But I think the thing that I like about him is he's just kind of gets into the page and just tries to make sure that, you get a feeling, an atmosphere from it. And I definitely feel for myself that's what I try to do. Even when I'm working in Clip Studio Paint, when I'm doing my comics, I want this kind of feeling, this traditional feeling that you're just kind of getting in there enough of the information, like I just did with that character, with the first stage of the transformation, that you need to have the refined line to spot out some of the stuff once you kind of really go after it with a brush. And that's kind of what I'm setting up here. I feel like because I ink most of everything I do, I don't do super finished looking pencils underneath, because for me, I know where I want to go with it, and if it's close to where I want it to be, I can always refine it and edit it with when I'm finally getting in there with my brushes and stuff. So the thing about this, the reason I'm doing all this and looking really at other artists who've handled this stuff, is because I am going to be doing a graphic novel, and I've written about 15 to 25 pages of it. And the way I write it, I'll try to show it on the channel about how I do my graphic novels, is I kind of write it as I'm drawing it. So I use Photoshop and I jump in and I just do kind of sketchy images and put text in. I try to do it by scenes, and then sometimes I'll just go in and get rid of an entire page or half a page or move a page. But I've really felt more comfortable as a writer using my plotting as an artist as I'm doing it. So instead of just typing in like Microsoft Word or something, I'm more interested in doing this kind of thing where I'm trying to work things out. And when you do a sketch like this, in my mind, I'm like, how am I pulling this whole thing together? And I like how with Mike Ploog, what he did for this was he kind of used, it was like a dreamlike image, but it was kind of, you think about the fur of the werewolf, and it's kind of moving in and around him. So he's evolving from this human form into this wolf form, but he's also kind of surrounded by like this kind of foggy, dreamlike images, and then he becomes this wolf. So I'm trying not to make it exactly the same. He drew his guy. He does have a very specific look, but there are parts to it that I really want to try to remember when I try to have maybe some transformations in the book, or for some backgrounds and things like that. Because, this, he came around, he was in the 70s when this happened. So I was thinking the early 70s. I was very young. But it definitely made an impression on me. And I find like these artists I'm looking at again now, years later, and trying to try to get my own version of how they handled their books. So as you can see, even with the hands especially, you just want to have a good feeling for how they're kind of moving. And I really do stylize the fingers as much as I can. I don't know if all hands could look like this, if they're moving like this, but I think it gives a lot of emotion to the character, and as always, that I think is important is that feeling of motion, or that feeling of animation in all of your work when you're doing it for this kind of thing. It's not a very stagnant image. So I do want to make sure that when I'm drawing things like this, I'm really going after it. But on the first level, it's the most refined part. As you can see, I'm just still, no matter what lines are there, I'm just like, okay, I just want to make sure that I'm in the right place. And in my head, I'm already editing how things are going to go. Where a nose is going to be, or how much detail it has to be, to give it that. So I'm moving up with a pen. It's a marker, but this is my next level, and I'm just trying to get the deeper lines in. And this is where I have a feeling with Ploog, he may very well have used one brush, because some of these guys were very skilled with just a specific brush. But for me, I do like to have a couple different levels of it, so that I'm not going through it too quickly. I feel like I go too fast sometimes, and I don't have enough contrast. So I think this helps. But I think I like where I looked at his illustration, and he has a very, he's putting all kind of marks in there, but these real deep marks inside really kind of anchor the character. I can put these in, but if it's not for the deeper darks that are around those hands, you might lose it. You might lose some of that line work. So this is the part that for him, the way Ploog did this, that I really want to try to do. And it's almost like he's pulling his skin off. I like that idea. So he puts these deep, dark areas in between the lines, and then he just creates lines that go straight up into the face. So I'm trying to get that feeling with this, and that's what I like. I don't see that many artists do it like he does it, and we can all learn a lot from those masters at the time. Now remember, these kind of guys used to work, they're working every month, and he's kicking out a 22-page to 24-page comic every month, and he may have been working on 2 of them. So imagine the workload that you have to do something like that. And these guys didn't make a lot of money, so they really needed to keep close to these deadlines, and most people just can't do it. Or you can do it for a little while, but it's the great pros that are making great art, and still staying by a deadline. We think about people nowadays, it could take them months to do an issue, or just to do a few drawings that takes them a week or 2. And these guys, they were probably doing 4 or 5 pages a day, and then moving on. It takes a lot, and it's physically to be able to do something like that. So again, here I am with this stronger line. It's not my kind of dry brush look yet. And to get all this in, I think it's very important I'm just spotting those blacks to make sure it's in. But I'm also trying to remind myself about the design, which is having the fur of the bigger face of the werewolf move right into the figures. So they're intermingling, they're overlapping each other, while the hair from the werewolf, the bigger head, kind of moves in between them. So again, you can see, trying to get some contrast in there, and then I'm going to try in this part because the head is so much bigger than the other ones, than the figures, now just to really start saying, okay, this is what that, a leaner, lighter area. I'm not going to put any eyes inside it. I'm just going to keep it white. And then for the rest of it, all I'm just trying to do is, again, get these little contrasty areas that I know have to be established. If you don't have that thin line, I feel like if it's all one line weight, I don't think it's enough variety to make it interesting. But even here, I'm just still doing the architecture of it. I'm using my pencil lines, but I'm not wed to them. And it's just all feel. And I hope, it all works out in the end, because I'm just doing it. You come up with these kind of things, these characters, and you have to just go with your feeling about where these lines are going to go and how it's going to work out. So especially with faces, and especially if it's a werewolf, that, it's not like I try to look at reference as much as I can for faces and things, but I feel like when I'm left to my own and allowing it to be as much as I can to be loose like this and stylized, then I think my work looks a little better. I do consider myself more of a mannerist, where I'm elongating things, and I think that's when my stuff looks the best. I'm not as good as some of the more traditional guys who do comics. So now I've moved on to my my brush pen, my Pentel pocket brush pen, and I'm really going to spot some of these blacks to get in there. Now this is, to me, where it's the real stuff is happening. So if I'm going to be successful with this sketch, this specific day, I don't know, this was day like 4 or something like that, sketch, this is when it's going to happen. And I have to be aware that if I'm going to focus like Ploog would have done it, I really have to have these darker areas that are going to just pop when I eventually put some gray wash on it too. But I'm just going to kind of move in, and now I'm trying to be very aware of when they're overlapping each other and what arm should be in front of another arm, and is it making sense? And remember, in the beginning, there's a larger head back there that all the hair is moving in between the characters. But it also has this feeling of dreamlike quality, like an aura around them. And that's what I really want to try to get. And, Werewolves, the big part that I think when I was a kid, I really loved the transformation part. Because you can imagine it happening. And, the old movies, like with the Lon Chaney werewolf from, I think that was 1941 or 2 or whatever that was, they would just have the guy stand and, sit in place, and they would slowly change the makeup. So they would add more and more. And it was very cool. I'm sure in the 40s, too, they were, amazed by it. But in comics, this is, I think the best way. When you see a piece of art like this, and, it becomes a graphic design also, of course. But I think when you see the transformation like this is kind of how I always see it. Now with computer-generated, CGI stuff, they do some spectacular stuff. But to me, the art of this, the way Ploog has done it, this is why the medium is so different. And because it has to be a graphic design as well as a story component. And all you're doing is, as an artist, you're just trying to be like, does this read? And for me, I'm just going with it, trying to feel this out. I think that's how he was. He would just kind of probably get his major lines in and everything, and then kind of go after it in his style that he loved to do. And that's kind of what I'm doing here. So that the part where he's like this part here, where he becomes more demon-like, you can see the kind of transformation quickly. And then it's just going to be up to me of when I allow the light, the lighter lines to shine, or am I focusing in on another part? So with the hair, like I don't know whether people will read it like that as much, but I like that part of the dream part. So again, but without these darks, without these, big sections of black, it really anchors that character. And as you look at things, I always try to tell everyone to squint your eyes periodically and see what you're seeing, and can you see the contrast? And is it all there? Like, is it easy to read? I feel like it's successful if you're doing all that. All right, so I've gotten a whole lot of area in there, kind of close to where I'm wanting it. And so now I'm going to try to focus in on that face, because depending on what the viewer is doing, will they look at the face first, or do they look at it last? And, people tend to read from left to right if it's an English comic, not Japanese or something like that, where they're reading from the other way. So I'm used to going from left to right. So no matter how big this face is, I would think the reader is supposed to look from the very first part and then realize what's happening. Now you may, after you're into the page, you may see it as that the face is so important in this. But for me, I think that I still want to look at it like it's a comic and have people realize what's going on after they get the first impression of it, and then they see through. So I like this idea too of the third stage of the werewolf kind of peeking through the hair, even just they're like in the head of this werewolf in the front. Now, because I know I'm going to be doing a gray wash on this, I try to remind myself not to go too much with the ink, because I'm going to have a lot of darker values of gray that can do the job just as well as just going through with the line. You can see it's very dry brush looking. I like that for this. And I feel like that's why I do love this specific Pentel brush pen, because it's giving me that feeling that I do want. I want that in my sketches. And when I don't want that feeling, I try to use it differently. I won't use as much of the dry part. I want to allow it to go, so because there may be a little bit less ink than there needs to be in it to get this dry look. And it's just the life of it. So again, he's up there rolling along. I feel like it's doing what I want it to do. But in my mind, I know what's coming after this. And, the finish will look much different once I put that gray wash on it and go from the lights to the darks when I have that. Just going through, trying to show on the camera what I'm doing here. Again, in my mind, I'm thinking, should I take more out? Should I take less? Should I just wait and then come back with my brush later? Just kind of moving around. And once again, I say this 1,000 times, but you squint and you really look to see, is it doing what you want it to do? Can you see it easily? Should there be more darks somewhere else? You can always get darker, just can't get lighter again. And just as an illustration, I think, this is basically Ploog's design. I just rotated it a little. and I'm trying, I'm just, doing my own version of that. But as always, this is kind of where you come up against. Remember, everyone, I am a working cartoonist, so make sure that you're using the links to some of the different stuff that I am selling. These are convention sketches, and I will be doing, and I'm always doing conventions. So if you ever see me out there, or if I also do commissions. But here's some of my adult books, graphic novels. I do kids stuff too. But take a look on my Amazon store, and these are all for sale. And like I say, I do a certain amount of commission work. So if you're interested in some of the things that I've been posting, it's all there. Support me. Like and subscribe, of course, as always. Okay, so this is pretty much finished with the ink part. And now I get these semi-moist watercolor set. And all I'm going to use is the black. I'm going to water it down to do the lights to the darks. So when I do something that that just has this monochromatic feel, compared to, and instead of using a second color, which I do really like to do, for this Inktober sketches, I'm just keeping it black and white. So I'm going in here and I have to establish some of these where those shadows are. And I don't want to go too dark, too fast with some of this. But this is, to me, kind of like almost a medium gray. I wouldn't consider that a light gray. And sometimes I'll just get a little more water on it if I feel like I'm not controlling it enough. And then start doing this. Now you can see when you have water, like this gray wash on top of the ink, you can really lean on the watercolor to get some depth into the drawings. Like when I look at this, I'm just like, yeah, I don't want to lose too much with this, but I also don't want to allow it to have too much white area. We're on a white background and all that. So, these are sketches, and hopefully they'll really help me when I do the book to remind me of like these little parts to show the transformation or to show a character in transformation. Just kind of laying in the lights, getting closer and closer. And then this will also unify the whole design too. Every time you do something consistently throughout the piece or any work that you're doing, and you're just kind of using the same technique, it'll organize it for you to help you, like get you to make it read a little bit better. Now the problem with any kind of character like this, like, you can get too dark right away because you're like, oh, I want that dark. You see the character as being brown, and it's kind of a dark brown. But when you're doing in this gray wash, you really have to say, you want to allow the line to be strong, and you don't want it to be one of those things where you see it and you're like, it doesn't really help with the overall design. And that's why, for me, as I get darker through it, sometimes I'll just blot out big areas because I just don't think that there's not enough contrast. if there's too much information going on, as a viewer, you could get lost inside of whose arm is this or who's that, like what part of a character. Going pretty dark here. I think as I do some of the other episodes, other pages that'll be for this Inktober sketchbook, I want to keep in mind the variety of ways you can use the great technique. So I feel like I should go really dark on some and maybe not so dark on others. These don't have any true big time backgrounds, so whenever I do those and I have gray wash, I really lean on them to show the difference of a character being in a scene. It's so much easier once you look at it. So again, you can see how the line kind of now is allowing for the darks to come in and get the contrast. So when I get it right, and hopefully I get it right some of the time, is I really am able to balance the darks and the lights. So I'm feeling better about the werewolf, and now you're just kind of like, how am I bringing this into these characters who are already there? And you don't want to lose them and go too dark. But you do want it to read like they're coming out of, his head almost, So I'm just kind of trying to rotate the page. There's a gutter there in between, so I have to be aware that it's right there. And if somebody was going to view this when they open a book, how much of it falls into the gutter, and again, is it legible? Without seeing a photo of these kind of people, you are just making things up. So I'm trying to keep the light source pretty consistent, coming up from the right top, And most cartoonists, you're so used to just deciding where that light is. And it could be double light on sometimes, that happens a lot. And sometimes it just looks cool to have light coming from a different place, and you're like, I like it, so I'm not gonna be forced into making something happen when I like the look of it, because it can just work. And then you're like, I know that the light probably wouldn't have been, that's not how it would have been in reality, but if you like it visually, I think you got to move and do these, take your artistic license and make it into whatever you need to make it into. Now, the thing about gray wash is it happens fast. It happens really fast. And, you have to know when to stop, because you could just keep going and going and going and not, losing the spontaneity that, you were hoping to have achieved. So I'm really coming down to the end of it, and I just keep looking, and I'm just like, is that dark enough? Is this dark enough? Does that shoulder need to be way more in shadow so that the character next to it is seen better? But this is, to me, as raw of a piece as you can kind of make it. There aren't any straight lines. Everything is just gestural. And if it was Ploog, he would have had, color on all of his pages. So he already was used to what he could do and what he couldn't do. But if he was doing it traditionally like this, painting, and he does paint, I'm sure he would have made different decisions for certain things within this if that's how he was doing it. I just like to see the marks and the scrubbing through it. I'm kind of getting close. Now it's just, is it good? Is it enough? And then just to think of what the next day's sketch is going to be like. If you haven't done Inktober, and you're just somebody who draws, it's really good for you. And it just gives you a focus on something. That's why I like to make it a theme that I can consistently kind of tell a story throughout the whole thing. So hopefully you enjoyed the episode. And I'm just going to keep working through the month and probably make another video at the end to show the entire piece. So here it is. Transformation into a werewolf. Just like Mike Ploog. See you next time.